Finance. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Finance will be conducted both via remote means only in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. Public participation guide and meeting documents are available in advance at www.capecod.gov. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or to file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at jmarczak@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit www.capecod.gov. There is also meeting links and instructions available on how to get into the meeting on the website. I believe that is it. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Well, I'll call the meeting to order. Now, the opening ceremonies. We'll have a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in service to our country and all those who are serving our country in the armed forces. That everyone that can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, gotta get rid of this somehow. There you go. All right. With that being said, Mr. Clerk, I need a roll call. And with that, I want to, maybe before the roll call, we actually have 6 members of the Assembly here, including both alternates, and one of the Assembly member Gallagher is not in attendance. So I have to appoint one person to the roll call. And I'll do that in order of longevity. Mr. Fuller, would you like to join as a full member today?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. And Mr. King, the Delegate King, I always recognize everyone on this call that's on the finance committee, regardless of their status. So believe me, if you raise your hand and have an issue, you will be heard. With that, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Delegate Friesel.
Here.
Delegate Fuller for Delegate Gallagher.
Here.
Vice Chair Killian.
Here.
Chair Oman.
Here.
Delegate O'Malley.
Here.
For 5, and as you noted, Delegate King is here in attendance as well.
Thank you, sir. All right. Number 6 on the agenda is the proposed ordinance 2026-03 to authorize budget transfer within the county's fiscal year 2026 operating budget as enacted by ordinance number 2025-03 in the amount of $70,000 for the general fund operations of Barnstable County. I would like to recognize Vera Herrick, please, to surmise this for us, please.
Good afternoon, Vera Herrick, Assistant County Administrator. It will be better accomplished by our Finance Director, Carol, who is also in attendance.
I didn't see her on. Oh, that's great. I did not see her on.
The chair to Carol, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Before you is a, I'm sorry, hold on 1 second. Before you is a proposed ordinance for a budget transfer. This would transfer funds from salaries and categories with regard to grant fiscal management. The county had an employee that left county services, and the county wishes to expand the current contract that it holds with an accounting firm, Clifford Larson Allen, and transfer these funds to support the grant management of human services grants.
Now, from the board, any questions for Treasurer Coppola? Delegate Prizell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I could ask the finance director, how many people are now employed, I guess, within the finance department, for grants management?
There are 2 full-time grant fiscal officers currently.
Okay, and how, in the past couple of fiscal years, how many have we had in that position?
We have had 4. We currently contract out grant management services for the cooperative extension grants, and then this would be to expand that to human services.
I see. How long have we had the contract with the accounting firm for these services?
We've had this contract in place since for 2 years, and it's really 2 years and a few months.
And I assume everything has gone well using them.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I will now recognize Delegate O'Malley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering why, if this contract is specific to the grant review for a particular department, why this is coming in under general budget rather than under, in this case, human services, and previously you mentioned the extension service. It was not it had not been my understanding that that these were that specifically targeted. Can you follow that?
I'll try to answer that question. These were positions that fell under finance. And so they really are financial management positions of these grants. It's not something that the department itself would contract for these services. And certainly they're not limited to the departments that I mentioned, but those are the departments in which they're currently working with cooperative extension.
All right, I understand. I think that's reasonable. This is essentially, this is your department responsibility for this financial oversight. Okay, all right, I'll accept
That's
that. Thank you.
correct.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. If there's nobody else in the finance committee, I don't see any hands up. I actually enjoy farming this out to somebody because it eliminates the benefits packages for some point in time. But it also follows the direction of Administrator Dutton. I think he wanted to reimagine how we're going to have a county government and how many employees we actually have to have and how else. So I agree with that. I think, is there any limit to the time that CLA can do this? Is there some sort of a breaking point where they have to be considered employees? I know that there's something in that regard generally, but is there anything to do with this sort of arrangement you have with CLA now?
I'm not aware of any limitations that they have. I know that they manage grants for other organizations as well, other governmental and nonprofit organizations. So I'm not aware of any limitations whatsoever.
That's comforting to know. I hope it goes on like that. Like I said, I think it's overall you get the expertise without the added benefit package that you have to have long term. So that was my only question on it, and we've discussed this before, and I have no further questions. But I see Delegate Prizell with a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one further question. So, as I understand grant accounting, every year we have to file a report called a single audit with the federal government to show that we have expended the funds correctly and we're in compliance. Does this outsourcing make it easier for us to finish that portion of the work with our own independent auditing accounting firm, or does it not make any difference?
Well, I'd be happy to answer that question. The document that I think you're referring to is the schedule of federal awards. We call it in short brief, CFA, the CFA. We prepare that internally, and certainly CLA is involved with their portion of the grants in preparing that document. And then our independent auditors audit that document. And then ultimately it's sent to the federal government. So yes, their work is, I can tell you that their work is exceptional.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if you'd like a motion, I'm prepared to.
I was just going to ask for that, Delegate Frizzell. Thank you.
In my motion, though, I would like to modify this slightly because in the budget, we have categories and expenditures are within categories and they're not to be categorized, if you will. And I would prefer to respect that because this is actually a transfer from category A, which is wages, to category D, which is contractual services. So I would prefer to see the ordinance reference those categories in the body of the ordinance.
Thank you. Should we now, Delegate Frizzell, you're an expert in this sort of thing. Should we do that right now? Or can we do that at the full assembly meeting?
Well, I would ask the clerk a preference. I mean, if we approve the substance of what I'm suggesting, the clerk could make those red line changes. Not a lot necessary on this ordinance to reflect that, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Clerk?
You are chair and you guys are members and you can do what you want, of course, but I think it's cleaner and my preference would be to take a vote on the substance of the changes that the Finance Committee would be recommending the full assembly make. And then I can work with the members of the committee and staff from administration and finance to make sure whatever goes back to the assembly reflects what you voted on. But
In essence, it's going to do the exact same thing, just in a cleaner, more organized fashion.
Right. Yeah. Just
Very good.
respecting the categories. Yeah.
So would you like to make that full motion now, Delegate Frizzell?
I will. I noticed Delegate Killian has his hand
Oh,
raised.
I'm
I don't
sorry.
know whether. Yeah.
Delegate Killian?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. But so it is called out in the ordinance itself. It says the funds from the finance salary category go into the professional and technical services associated with. So are you just trying to clean that language up
Yes,
a little bit
that's
to make
all.
it more
Yes.
specific?
Yes, that's
You know,
all. in there.
referencing the specific categories?
Yeah,
if you-
category capital A, category capital D. That's it. Just so it respects the same form we have in the underlying ordinance for the budget. Yeah.
Okay, so if you just want to provide that language, we can vote on that.
Okay. I mean, the clerk was.
Well, I think what you're intending to do is, if you agree with the language as stated, the clerk will actually formally write that up for the full assembly to determine. I think that's sufficient to complete the act.
I think that's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a lot of words on this one to get that done. I mean, if you like, I would just say that we'd say finance category, salary category A to provide necessary funding for professional technical services in category D. But that's my off the cuff way of doing it. But the clerk may have a better
Or
way
a more
to
formalized
get
way
that.
of saying
Yeah,
it.
formalized way to get that done. But
I
as the
believe we can vote
substance-
on the intent of that without having a precise language. Unless there are anybody that disagrees with that, let me know now. Seeing none, is that so moved?
that's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second. Is there further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, I will ask for a roll call vote.
can I just
Clerk.
ask for a clarification on the question, Mr. Chair? So basically, this would be a vote on whether to recommend to the full assembly that it
Yes.
adopt this ordinance with additional language indicating which category the money is moving from and to.
Right.
Okay. You'd like a roll call on that, Mr. Chair?
Would like a roll call on that.
All right. Delegate Frizzell,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller for Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes.
Chair Omen,
Yes,
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes,
That's five yeses, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's move on to number 7, proposed ordinance 2026-04 to authorize a supplemental appropriation to the fiscal year 2026 operating budget as enacted in ordinance number 25-04, including one-time and new initiatives in the amount of $200,000 for purposes of funding a federal indirect, internal indirect, and external rate study. Who from the administration would like to tackle that one?
I'd be happy to address that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This proposed
Bonnie.
ordinance would be funded through unreserved fund balance to conduct a federal indirect cost rate study, and that would apply to grant funding. An internal cost study that would apply to internal departments such as dredge and other departments where you have core services that are being provided to whether it's the dredge, or it could be Aquafund, or it could be any of those funds where they're receiving significant support from the county. And then an external rate study, and that would include departments like IT, the laboratory, services to provide vaccinations. Not saying that you may or may not choose to utilize all those departments as far as outside fees, but at least you'll know what it costs you to provide those kind of services to the to different communities. And so this rate study was developed. There was an RFP developed. I developed an RFP with some assistance. And though that has been advertised, we've received 5 submissions, and which have not been, the review has not been completed until we knew we had an appropriation in place.
Thank you. From the board. Well, let me start with Delegate Killian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, Director Coppola. So I know we've done studies looking at salaries. Have we ever done a study like this? Because I certainly don't recall doing one where we're actually looking at true cost versus what we're expending.
Mm-hmm. I am not aware that one has ever been completed here at the county. However, I will say that the Cape Cod Commission has a federal indirect cost rate that's authorized by the government every year. So they did undertake that process for federal grants.
Okay, great. This is something that's probably long overdue.
Yes. I mean, I think that the rates for IT in particular were set in 2015.
I can believe that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Delegate Prizell.
You're muted.
Seem to be muted.
I'm sorry. I have a couple of questions, and then I do have a couple of suggested language changes if we do go forward recommending this to the Assembly. First, the questions. So I kind of get the indirect study for grants, because that becomes part of some of where the grant money goes. It goes into the administration of the grant as an indirect, as I understand it. But correct me if I'm wrong about that. I guess I'll direct that question to the finance director first.
You're not incorrect about the federal indirect cost rate. That's correct.
Okay. Now, and I get the external rate, and I agree with Delegate Killian, probably long overdue. So I'm not, I think that's a good idea, but I'm not sure where we headed with the results of this internal indirect. Where does that lead us if once we get this data? What do we do with it?
Well, so for an example, the dredge is an enterprise fund.
Mm-hmm.
Enterprise funds are charged indirect cost rates. The indirect cost rate that's being charged to the dredge has no supporting scope whatsoever.
Mhm.
But I've searched and searched for a history of how the numbers, if you will, or percentages of each department, where that came about, and I have come up with no results.
Mhm.
So that's just one example. If you ever wanted to, if the county ever thought that maybe, they wanted to know what Aquafund, what support services are provided, this is just an example, to Aquafund or any of the other funds, and maybe for information only, maybe not. Then in order to do that, you've got to conduct a study. Because otherwise the numbers are really meaningless and they have no support.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So how do you know that, or why are you confident that $200,000 is enough, or the right number, shall we say, for this project?
I mean, I did some research in order to be able to come up with that number. I thought it was going to be a range of somewhere around 175,000 to 200. I made some inquiries as well with some qualified firms, just to see, what something like this would cost, or what their knowledge was of something like this. Not any of the firms that provided submissions. So, I mean, I think we're pretty confident in the number.
And do we have any numbers from the RFP?
We have not finished evaluating the RFP. And so once it's evaluated, it's scored, and then the cost proposals,
I
they're
see.
submitted separately,
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
would be opened.
Yeah, I get that. Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll stop here, but if we do go forward, I do want to make some suggestions here to the language.
Thank you. Delegate O'Malley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, on several lines. Number one, on the federal grant, do we not routinely charge a 10% de minimis? And if that is the case, then where would we go with this information? Let me take them one at a time.
So you are correct. It's called a de minimis, and that changed to 15% last October, last October. But indirect cost rates take into account much greater information, and typically are set somewhere around 40%, somewhere in that area. They can be higher than that too, because it takes on all of the cost of providing support for the grant program that is being conducted.
Okay, that's interesting. In which case, that change, I presume, to 15% was at the federal level, rather than a decision we made, certainly.
So for various reasons, the county had made the decision in the past not to look at a federal indirect cost rate. There's an extensive amount of work that goes into that, in setting that rate, and then that it gets set every year or approved every year by the federal government. 15% is a small amount of a grant. So if the county were to accept a grant for $10,000, and 40% of that grant was going to federal indirect cost rate, that would reduce the amount that can be used for the program by significantly.
Oh, all right. What I'm hearing is that that's a rate we changed, and I don't recall that we ever attended to that issue. And if that's the case, if in fact the indirect costs are actually in the ballpark of 40%, it sounds as if we have been substantially receiving substantially less from the grants than we should have been. Is that really the case?
It's not necessarily that your $10,000 grant is going to be increased by that 40% just to cover your indirect cost. The $10,000 grant stands on its own. So you would only have $6,000 to spend on the program. which is one of the reasons why, my understanding, one of the reasons why in the past, the county has swayed from that kind of decision.
Um, all right. I'm sorry, but I'm going to stay with this a little bit longer. Are these external costs not likely to be particular to each grant? That it's not going to be standard across all of them. And that being the case, how will a single study done at this point in time inform our decisions about whether to pursue grants in the future that might have, these indirect costs as high as 40%?
So each grant that the county accepts and expends requires effort from IT, from finance, from administration, so on and so forth. And they all have the same kind of effort, if you will, that comes along with the acceptance of a grant.
Mm.
And so these costs are not program related. They aren't even department related, department of where they reside. Like, let's say we're talking about human services grants.
Right.
Those aren't the costs that this is looking to capture. We have a ERP system that's very expensive. We have an audit that's very expensive. And so though all of those costs would get broken down into and factored into a federal indirect cost rate. And they would be, and every year they would be addressed, and the county should be able to do that, just like Cape Cod Commission does, addressed with actual costs to determine whether that federal indirect cost rate would go up or down.
All right. It strikes me then that this is probably a very valuable thing to do because
Yes.
it gives us a greater perspective on the baggage that comes with the grants that we're going for. Okay, so the second part, and I'll melt the second and third questions together. We have done in the last year or so rate increases for our provided services for both the laboratory and for the dredge. Am I understanding that these external costs were not significantly factored in or adequately factored in, shall I say, into those rate studies? And is it likely that this information would be pushing us in the direction of pushing rates higher?
So this will specifically exclude dredge for an external rate study because it's so specified. And the county worked with Anchor QEA, which is a firm that that are subject matter experts in that area. And I think to muddy the water here with something like that would have not set us on the right ground moving forward, right?
Right.
But I know that the dredge rates were there were multiple factors that went into that dredge rate study that was completed by Anchor QEA, and though that included what the market would bear, the actual cost of providing a dredge, projecting future costs as well, the cost of supporting a building, a facility. So there was a lot of factors that went into the dredge study. The rate study for the laboratory, the lab rates they really looked at the market. They didn't look internally as to what does it cost to deliver a laboratory. So this would certainly look at those factors.
Director Coppola, thank you so very much. Yeah, that's very useful to me. Thank you.
Delegate Frizzell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to just try to understand what happens here. So if we allocate a higher percentage than the 15 we're currently allocating to the administration of the grant, and does that mean that not only that the amount of that grant, those grant funds available to the particular department to be spent on the program gets reduced, but also that the budget or the amount of money that's now being allocated to our finance department, for example, or IT department, if they're the ones involved, whoever is providing the indirect amount, their budget, if you will, gets higher because they're getting a greater allocation of that grant. I'm trying to understand the implications here of making a change in that number in the grants. And the second question is, do we have the freedom to just set any number, or do we have to still get it passed and approved by the federal government?
The second part of your question is very easy. Yes, indeed, has to be approved by the federal government. It has to be approved every year, and with substantiating documentation. So it's not something that, you know, the county could say, oh, I think it's 50%. You can't do that. And so there's regulations, and you have to jump through quite a number of hoops in order to get a federal indirect cost rate established and approved. So that was the second portion of your question. The first one with regard to what's the mechanism, right? So right now, the federal de minimis that we charge grants, it's an expense or a charge to the grant itself, and then it comes in at general fund revenue. So there's no expense on the general fund side that would increase for that purpose. So that's how it happened. That's what occurs right now with de minimis. A federal indirect cost rate is no different. The grant gets charged directly, and then there's revenue that comes into the general fund.
Yeah, but at the revenue that comes into the general fund, where does that money get allocated to what department? You're telling me or us that if you increase the administration number, you're decreasing the program number. So obviously it seems like the people who operate the program have less money to spend on the program, so that those displaced funds, if you will, from the program go somewhere. I know they're in the general fund, but then from the general fund, they get into some other budget somewhere. So does it go into the finance department bucket or IT? Is it going to get spread around to different places?
So if the county would choose to move forward with the federal indirect cost rate, as I had mentioned before, the program would need to be reduced. Doesn't mean that it's going to have a creep, if you will, a budget creep to the general fund. The program would have to be reduced.
Yeah, but then that other money, in your example, the $4,000 of indirect, it goes somewhere else in the county. So that 4,000 must go into the budget of some other department, right?
So it comes in as revenue, and it doesn't need to be added to a department's budget.
I see.
As far as expenditure side is
Oh,
concerned.
okay. All right. That's the answer I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, if I may, I don't see any other hands up. If I may, I have a couple of questions. I reviewed your actual presentation to the commissioners on January 14th, and in it, I was very gratified to hear that you were going to be able to review the dredge budget, but now that seems to have changed because of a further discussion. We cannot review this with the dredge program because it's sort of set in steel. Is that accurate?
Well, I know that the dredge program is working on a flexible rate scope of work with Anchor QEA to talk about a potential of an annual increase based on or decrease based on the costs that they've experienced. It's so technical and specialized that I don't think bringing this into this scope of work would have, resulted in a product that maybe the county, I'm not really sure how they would have done if we included dredge, but I know dredge is currently working with Anchor QEA waiting for a proposal to be able to perform some kind of work for rate studies moving forward.
To me, the only reason I asked that is because there seems to be this internal study that you want $200,000 for. The dredge would be the biggest component of that. You know,
Yeah.
that because we really don't know. I've been with this dredge for 30 years now, and we really don't know how much it costs them to go into any indirect costs. It's never been studied. So it bothers me that for 200 grand, we're not even gonna get to see the biggest component of that, of the benefit of that. But I'll talk to that later with the board. But I want to ask you a much more indirect question, if you will. On January 14th, all three commissioners voted for this as a supplemental budget. And in the recent past, Commissioner Forrest, now Chair Forrest, has said there shall be no additional supplemental budgets. We have to do this through the budget process. He was very adamant about that, and yet he voted for this anyway. So I want to know why now, and why not in the fiscal 27 budget, which is coming right around the corner. Can we put that money in? Is there a necessity to violate the thought process of Commissioner Forrest and go forward with this, or can this wait and go into the 27 budget?
It certainly could have waited. We were hoping to have this, the study itself done this fiscal year and then implement new rates in FY 27. That was the thought process behind this work.
That's why this is a difficult question for you to ask you. I should be asking the commissioners this directly. They wanted to have no further supplemental budgets. They wanted everything to go through the budget process in direct order like that. And now this seems to be a violation of their own thought process. I guess you're up on deck, but that's the question that needs to be answered for me before I would vote for this. Why now and not in the FY 27 budget? That's my biggest question now. I agree with what you're doing in general terms. You know, I wish that and again, you advocated for the dredge when on, I think it was January 14th meeting when you promoted this to the commissioners at their meeting on the 14th. But something changed there, and now we're spending 200 grand and not putting the biggest gorilla in the room that needs to be looked at. So that was my question. It's why now and why not go into the 27 budget? And I don't think that's the question because you're up right here on deck, but it's probably something I'd rather go through the commission directly is why now and why not in the 27 budget. That's my thought. You don't have to answer that. I just wanted to bring that point up, and perhaps you can go to the commissioners and ask them that question too.
Noted.
Thank you. I see Delegate Frizzell.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think probably the only answer I can think of to what you've just said is the sooner the better. If we get this information sooner, we can implement new rates sooner. And if we put it in the 27 budget, then we delay getting this information and implementing any new indirect charges, external or internal, or grant-wise later. It may not happen until sometime during calendar 27, as opposed to happening maybe in calendar 26 or early 27. So that's the only thing I can think of is the timing. And we now, at this point, have a better idea as to what the size of our general fund, unreserved fund balance is. So it's easier to look at that as a potential source.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else's hand up. If there is no further discussion, I would entertain a motion. Or not.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if you will, then I'll move this forward at least for discussion and see whether there's a vote in favor. I would move that we authorize or recommend to the Assembly the proposed ordinance for the study. I think in that process of doing it, as I said before, I thought we should make a couple of some clarifications to this if we do go forward. But perhaps, if you like, we could, nothing I'm going to suggest is substantive. It's purely clerical clarification language. Maybe you'd want to get some sense from the committee whether there's a vote to move this forward at all at this point.
Well, that's what the motion would do, is not.
Yeah. That's what I'm making the motion.
Make the
haven't heard
motion
a
to move
second.
this forward.
Yes, I haven't heard a second.
As presented, okay.
I'll
Do I-
second.
Who's the second? We have a
Killian.
second. Mr.
Killian.
Killian, okay, good. Is there further discussion? Myself, I feel like I don't want to vote for this going forward personally, because I want to know why it's being done in the 26 fiscal budget, as opposed to going through the process the commissioners outlined very strongly to us recently. So I will not be in support of this. I'm in support of the whole process. I wish the dredge was part of it, because that's the big gorilla in the room to me. Is that if you're gonna look into a study, I think the dredge is the big unknown and the most money involved, as opposed to anything else I've heard. So I won't vote for for this forward. But if there's no other further discussion, I'll call for a roll call.
I do see Delegate Harder's hand up.
Oh yes, I will entertain Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the dredge geek on the assembly, I can tell you that Anchor Q&A has done an intensive study for the past 2.5 years, and we set the dredge rates the way we did 1.5 years ago, because we had two options. We could either move them up every year, or we could do a big hike in the first year. And they did a whole study, they went through everything, and they decided that the best way to do it was right up front. So that study, we can ask Owen Clerk Fletcher to get it from Director Cirillo, but it was intense and in depth. And they are now doing more in-depth work on it, because they're finding that with all of the problems that happen to the dredge department have nothing to do with the dredge department. It's whether it's time of year restrictions, it's whether or not the towns get their permits. And so they have decided now to look at a more flexible fee range, so that towns that are ready to go, they can go. Towns that aren't, that's what they're looking into. Anyway, it's very complicated, but I will say that I don't think the dredge should be in this. It is very special. It is really complicated, and Anchor Q&A is, to my opinion, doing a really good job trying to come up with the answers. So I suggest if you want, we could talk to the Director Cirillo and Anchor Q&A to get your questions answered. Thank you for taking my.
It seems to me that what you said is very true, but it doesn't go to the indirect costs. What you said is all indirect costs. Whether we can do it or not, we're going to have staff no matter what. Those indirect costs are not being allocated to the county. Find out really if we should have a dredge. I mean, honestly, we don't know that. And this, I thought, when the original thing came out with the county commissioners on January 14th, the dredge was going to be part of that. So I think that let me finish my sentence, and I'll recognize you if you have your hand up. So I just think that those are the kind of things that we're looking at $200,000 costs, and we're keeping the biggest number that's so as you said, is so important to us that they're not even being allocated. What if we only do 10 with that next year because of the indirect cost of having a big staff and no dredging because there's no permits? Those are the kind of questions that we really need to answer. And I don't know if Anchor's done that or not, but that's the kind of questions I have. And thank you.
I think they were done, but
okay, thank you. I see two other people I would like to recognize. Administrator Herrick, please.
Thank you. I will say, unless I'm mistaken, that the study that's being proposed for will allow us to identify the charges that would be appropriate to charge the dredge program for our county support of the dredge. And so that's where unless I'm mistaken, that's where there's intersection between the dredge and the study. The niceties and the complexities of how to price the dredge externally, not internally, don't come to bear on this $200,000 study. So I hear what you're saying, Chair Oman, but I think Delegate Frizel's comment as to the why in fiscal 26 is exactly right, because the sooner we have this information, the sooner we can right size what we are charging various departments for the core services that the county provides, as well as for external services. The dredge comes to mind. Also, the Cape Cod Commission comes to mind. They're not being charged an indirect rate right now. There's thinking that they should be, and so this would allow us to apply those various costs and that information accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the one of the other troubling thing I heard from the discussion about the dredge is that the basic bottom line was that they can only charge what the market will bear, which is true in life, but that doesn't mean that we're charging the right amount of money. Yeah, we don't know if our costs are being properly remunerated. So anyway, I love the dredge. I actually think this is a great idea. This is a really good idea. I don't know why it's being done now as opposed to what the commissioners, especially Chair Forrest, wanted. There's no more supplemental budgets. Let's go through the budget process. So that's my questions, and that's my concern. I thought I saw Director Coppola with her hand up.
I'm all set, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate King has his hand up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I can't see you. Okay, Delegate King, please.
Wait a minute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any pressure from the federal government to have this right done? Anybody? Carol?
I think that's Director Coppola.
No, there's no pressure. The county can choose to charge a federal indirect cost rate if it's approved, choose the de minimis, or not choose any de minimis at all. So you can choose, when some grants allow for some federal grants allow for the full 15% de minimis, some federal grants like AmeriCorps does not. They allow more like 8% de minimis. And so it depends on the particular grant, and there's no pressure whatsoever from the federal government to undertake this work.
I have a fair, sorry.
Please go.
I have a fair amount of experience with grants, if Mr. Chairman, if I can go on.
Sure, please do.
If I understand it correctly, all the indirect rate is just an allocation of overhead. Isn't that what you're really talking about here? And whether we put the dredge in it or not, it's just it's almost like a separate company with a separate grant. And to answer, I think, someone's Frizzell question, I think actually theoretically, when we get a grant and distribute the cost to the individual departments, theoretically, the cost of those departments go down because they're getting funded through this grant as opposed to other ways to be funded. I guess it doesn't go down, but it's a way to fund all of our departments. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, I think I'll go to Assistant Director Herrick, please. Herrick.
Yes, thank you again.
My apologies.
Whatever you call me, I'm still here. What this information does is it gives you information, specific cost information with which which augments your policy deliberations. If you know the full cost of something and the cost benefit of doing this versus that, it allows a more well-reasoned policy response to what's being proposed. And so these sorts of cost studies are really useful for that purpose, not only for pricing what we do, but for making trade-off decisions with finite resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Frizzell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question quickly for the finance director, and then I want to energize my motion here and make some suggestions on how we might change the language. But the first question is, what is the current unreserved fund balance, the general fund unreserved balance? Do you have that number roughly in that you could give us?
Yes, I need to look it up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it'll just be a minute. It's just over $6 million.
6 million. So what we're talking about here is whether or not we want to spend what is what 3% of that unreserved fund balance. Get that right? Yeah, 0.03. So, for me, even though the commissioners may have said what they said, their policy, what they want, if there's sufficient funds that when spending something which is not going to in any way jeopardize our operations, and there's good reason to do it, I don't care. I don't abide by absolutes. And so I don't abide by an absolute that shall not do any supplemental budget. Personally, I don't view absolutes as the right way to budget. I think there are always circumstances that can modify, adjust an absolute. And I see good reason here. So I intend to vote for it and accelerate the timing, which could be helpful, as we've heard, for not cost reasons, policy reasons. I would suggest my motion was to approve it. And in doing so, I would just like to clarify and have the clerk post meeting do this. I think we need to specify something more definite as to what it's being spent on. The language in section 1 is too broad. I think we should define what we're spending the money on, and I think we could tie it to the RFP that's been proposed for this purpose. So we know where the money is going for what particular RFP that we're putting together for this purpose. And then secondly, I would modify the language in line 12, for where this money is going, because if you look at ordinance 25-04, there's no budget item called administration. There's finance. So I think we need to have the right place where this is going, so we're staying within the boundaries of the budget that we approved. Those are just clarifications, not substantive.
Thank you. My final comment is, without using the dredge as one of the components of this, is what's our return on investment for 200 grand? Maybe we should be thinking about different number.
Well, if I could respond to that point, Mr. Chair, I think that was clarified by the assistant administrator. We're not going to get an external study, but we are going to get an internal study on the dredge. The dredge, as the finance director said at the beginning, in explaining this is an enterprise fund. If we properly charge, then we know whether our enterprise fund is working or not. And that will be something we can learn from this internal study, as I understand. It will be an internal indirect cost.
Thank you for that. Director Coppola.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on Delegate Freisel's suggestion with regard to tying the ordinance to a specific RFP. The RFP has not been reviewed yet, the results of it. And if for some reason the county had to, I guess it certainly reserves the right to return all, if you will, all of the submissions to the respectful owners and without making decision, and may perhaps go out and, for another RFP if the results are not where as anticipated. So if it were me, I would not be that specific, just in case that process had to be examined further.
Mr. Chair, I'm a little concerned about giving an evergreen to this. Why can't we just say for the purposes specified in the RFP blank, and not necessarily tie it to that particular RFP, but for purposes that are there, specified there. So we have some more clarity as to what this is. I mean, someone looking at this indirect cost rate study, they're not defined terms. So it would be helpful to have something more specific.
Thank you. Assistant Director Herrick.
Thank you. Yes, further on Delegate Freisel's commentary, which I agree with, but if we instead of saying the RFP, if we just say an RFP, that might cover it. Yeah.
An RFP that relates to these very studies, yes, that would be, yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
But these RFPs have gone out already, and they have gone out and have been responded to. Is that not true?
Yes. Yeah, we have an RFP posted now, and there have been I think 5 responses.
Yeah, that's what I heard earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no altering that. That's already gone out and returned.
Well, as to Carol's point, if we should find none of them satisfactory and wish to reissue an RFP under the language of the ordinance being proposed, if we use an, we would be able to do so without further burdening you or the process.
Okay. I always defer to the guys that have done this for a living. Mr. King, do you have anything else? I'd love to hear from you if you have anything to add.
No, I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right. No further discussion? Do we have a motion? Delegate Freisel has made a motion.
And I seconded it.
Yep.
And Mr. Killian has seconded. Seeing, if there's no further discussion, I'll call for a roll call right now.
Delegate Freisel,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller for Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes.
Chair Omen,
Reluctantly, no.
Delegate O'Malley.
Yes.
That is 4-1, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, our third most important thing here is the, let me get to this. It's number 8. Proposed ordinance 26-05 to authorize the apportionment of transfer $347,731 from capital stabilization funds for the First District Courthouse chiller underground piping replacement project. Who would like to take that from the administration?
I'll suggest Carol again with
Yeah.
the most detailed
Thank you.
perspective.
Director
Thank you.
Coppola, please.
Thank you. The county has completed a chiller replacement at First District Courthouse. During the completion of that project, it was noted that the pipes that are, under the ground, and could not be inspected prior to are failing or have failed, in the process of failing, if you will. And this provides, cooling to that building. And an investigation was completed as to the cost of replacing those pipes, alternatives that may have been presented, and I think before you is all the information with documentation with regard to the work that was done there. It's proposed to pull these funds from capital stabilization, which you have generously bolstered. And I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm hoping that you have all the detailed information with regard to the memo that was written by the assets and infrastructure manager, and all of the backup documentation with photographs as well.
It actually, to me, it seems very straightforward that money needs to be spent. And also, I appreciate the fact that they're going to do future pipes so that when the other cooler goes, that there will be no more tearing up of the driveway and the parking lot to get that done. I thought it was well done, and I have no questions. I see that Delegate Frizzell is asking.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, I see the need for this. I don't have a problem with that. Couple of just again, a more detail oriented. I personally think everything in Section 3 is unnecessary. We know there's such a thing, in fact, as emergency ordinances, which this is not. So I don't think we need Section 3, and I would prefer we delete it. And then I would ask, it's going to be transferred from the capital stabilization fund to where? What's its destination? Where is this going? It must be going to some budget account somewhere.
Yes, that's correct. That would be going into the capital budget for the county administration to supplement the chiller.
Doesn't this go to the facilities? I mean, who's spending the money?
Correct. We have a capital fund that we're required to maintain. Governmental accounting requires us to maintain capital funds in a separate fund. And so that is where the appropriation for the chiller is in a capital fund.
So we
This
should can we identify that fund in this ordinance?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. That'd be my suggestion here. If I will actually, I'll move this in order for us to save time. If you like, I'll move recommending this to the assembly with the clerk to make these clarifications that we just discussed.
There a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Delegate Killian. And now I know there's further discussion because I see Delegate O'Malley's hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like I'm unclear here. As I remembered it, this was money that was to be transferred from the roof replacement project in order to fund the chiller pipes repair on a kind of more urgent basis. And now I'm hearing that it's coming from the capital stabilization fund. Did I miss something? I'm trying to look at the ordinance and how we've gotten here, and I've seen different references to it. So can you explain that?
I think these are additional costs, Delegate O'Malley, but I'd rather refer to the experts in the game.
So we did originally propose a reappropriation, if you will, of $125,000 from a roofing project, and then pulled that, asked for that to be pulled off the table because there was more intensive work done to determine the actual cost to replace those chiller pipes, and it came in, it far exceeded the $125,000. And so we took that off the table, that proposed ordinance, asked you to send it back, and the commissioners have actually taken that up on their agenda at the last meeting, to, remove, the proposed ordinance. So coming before you replaces that proposed ordinance and with the correct amounts.
Thank you. I certainly think this needs to be attended to. Clearly, it fits in the category of we must do it. I just missed, I missed part of the trail here, lost the trail on this one. Thank you.
Any other further discussion? Delegate Prizell, please.
Yeah, similar comment before, and my thinking was Delegate O'Malley, but when I went back and looked at it, what helped me was the fact that the previous ordinance was done to get some funds immediately, but it turned out those weren't enough monies. They still need to do that roofing. They were going to defer doing that roofing, but they still
Right.
need the funds to do the roofing. So that's
Right.
why I think this is a good ordinance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Further discussion? I don't see anyone here.
I see this.
With that, I'll have a roll call now, please.
All right, Mr. Chair. That would be Delegate Prizell,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller for Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes.
Chair Omen,
Yes,
and Delegate O'Malley.
Yes.
That's five yeas, 0 nays, Mr. Chair.
thank you. We have one more agenda item that's more of a discussion. It's the discussion on review of the fiscal year 2027 proposed operating budget by the Assembly Standing Committee under the Regional Government Home Rule Charter, Section 5-5B. In general, I would like the Finance Committee to talk to us about how we would like to go through allocating all of the budget agenda items. I've been talking to our clerk, and he and I have come to an understanding that the last year was pretty good. We're getting the budget from the administration, from Mr. Dutton on the 18th. We probably don't want to ask him a lot of questions because we'll have our first look at it at that moment. But from that point on, we're on a timeline to decide who should be looking at this and what timeline it is. Do we have any suggestions? And maybe Clerk Fletcher, you can tell us how we did it last year if you have that at hand. For the finance board.
I do have if you give me 1 second. I was looking at this earlier today. Generally, and I would, if is the administration still here? I mean, generally the categories in the budget, there's a category for general governmental services, which is the Commissioner's Office, Administration, Finance, the Assembly, IT, I believe, is in that. There's a category for quote unquote county services that includes the registry, extension, facilities, as well. And then Health and Human Services, which generally includes the Cove and the Health and Environment Department and Human Services. And so last year, the Finance Committee divvied those up pretty cleanly and had the governmental services going to finance, including the Cape Cod Commission, which is more of a planning function, but has its own funding with the Joint Environmental Protection. Had the Public Services Committee handle facilities, extension, registry, AmeriCorps, because it's part of extension, and the dredge, and then had Health and Human Services handle the Cove, Human Services, and Health and Environment. That's how we did it last year. And then the Finance Committee subsequently voted to have the Telecommunications and Energy Committee review the IT budget, as the Finance Committee had a lot to do, and we were coming up against it. And traditionally, the Telecommunications and Energy Committee has done that budget. And so the thought was, and I know that you and I had discussed that, to kind of track with that, but wait until we got the budget to see which departments actually needed a larger review or a more close review. but to wait kind of until we got the budget book and the budget, and then have a finance committee meeting to really determine what that schedule looks like. I said a lot off the top of my head. I don't know how clear I was.
I think the idea is to thoroughly go through the budget and not be repetitive in the same process. That was the goal. And I think Administrator Dutton is going to be the lead person and from the administration handling that. So,
Well, and
I like the idea.
if I might,
Sure.
This process has been evolving, certainly since I've been clerk, based on things we've seen, and it's gotten better every year, just like the submissions from the administration have gotten better as well every year. And so, I think the thought this year was to have the administrator running point on the budget so that the delegates were hearing from one voice as much as possible, while not foreclosing the idea of having department directors in front of particularly standing committees if necessary, right? But to do it that way and really follow the charter, which says that the finance committee is supposed to cause review in standing committees of the assembly of the budget. And so that's a responsibility that's given to the finance committee under the charter. And we've been trying to work on ways to discharge that better as a body.
And importantly, make sure that all of our questions are answered. That's the goal.
Indeed.
I see Delegate Prizell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I thought I heard the clerk say that, based on discussion with you, that we might want to postpone making this kind of decision until we see the budget book, which to me makes sense. I think we've got a roadmap for what we did in FY26, but it wasn't always done that way. As the clerk mentioned, it was evolved. So we have prior years where it wasn't exactly the same as 26. So maybe once we see the budget book, we could then make some decisions about how to allocate it. But I don't know whether you're looking for a vote on this tonight or whether just in this discussion.
This is a discussion, not a vote.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
anxious to hear all of your ideas, all 6 members of the finance committee in attendance today.
Right. Well, I'd be in favor of having making some decisions about this once we get the budget book, and maybe the clerk could send around for our review the prior 2 or 3 fiscal years and how the allocations to other standing committees were done, so we have some comparisons.
We should that the clerk can do that if you wish. I think that honestly, this is my 30th budget, and they're getting better every year. There was a lot of repetition in past years that you might see or might not see by reviewing the last few years. But the one concern I have last year was that I think that there was a thought process that not everyone was able to ask all the questions they needed to ask. But if we funnel that through the administrator himself and not through the valuable time of the managers of the different departments, that would be better for the county in general. But if we need to talk to one of the managers of the companies, we can do that. That should be, well, we can pre-ask the questions and have them answered for us too. There's ways to do that and not disturb the flow of work that the county does through each department. So I'd be happy to ask Clerk Fletcher to do that if you wish. But I think this last year was the best one I've seen personally. Not Delegate Killian's seen 13 budgets now, right? At least. So
Yeah, more than a few.
Yeah. So what is your thought process, Delegate Killian?
No, I agree with Delegate Frizzell. I think it's important to look at what we're going to be reviewing and where we might need areas of more scrutiny than others. So I think it makes sense to take a look at it and regroup, maybe a week or so after we get it and determine what's going to work best for us.
We were thinking the 25th is the next Wednesday.
Okay.
All right. That's good. Anything else on this discussion? I value your opinions. Seeing none. I think that ends our agenda for the day. And I want to thank everyone online here that has contributed to this. I really appreciate the administration coming in, answering all of those questions so thoughtfully. I do appreciate that. And I appreciate your attendance as well. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
You figure out who that was? All those in favor by roll call, please.
All right. Delegate Frizzell,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller for Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Vice Chair Killian,
Yes.
Chair Omen,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley.
Yes.
All right, that's everyone in favor. Sir.
Thank you so much. Good night. Cape
Thanks,
Cod.
everyone. Good night.
Thank you.